the worst thing you've accidentally overheard? Story 1. I was home alone as a 12-year-old and my dad's friend called the house. I let it go to voicemail and he left a bizarre voicemail about my dad being the best friend he'd ever had. My dad came home 10 minutes later and I told him about the voicemail. Dad tried to call him and he didn't pick up. It turned out he shot himself immediately after leaving the voicemail, which was a pretty big mental time bomb for me. Story 2. Standing in line waiting for my Tim Hortons coffee. The girl in front of me was talking with her friend, so I caught HIV from this dude. It's okay though, it's not like I'm going to die right away. I want some of her positivity. Story 3. After speaking with my grandpa on the phone before he properly hung up, I heard him commenting to my uncle how ungrateful I was. I had at that point visited every week for a year and cleaned his entire bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, hallway and living room every single week, usually bringing some food or dessert with me. I moved out of town shortly after this. My family and I were at a restaurant and there was a father and his daughter, well called Dee, for daughter, sitting in the booth right across the aisle from us. Dee looked to be no more than 20 years old. She talks the whole time about her ex Chris. Apparently, Chris was married and Dee did not give two shits. She said it was the wife's fault for not being good enough to keep her husband faithful. Welp, Chris was still sleeping with his wife because she got pregnant. When Dee found out wife was pregnant, Dee told Chris he had to choose between her and his wife. At first, Chris chose Dee, then he found out his unborn child had congenital heart defects. So he called off the divorce, broke up with Dee, and moved back in with his wife. Dee sits there in silence looking slightly bewildered before saying, I don't know why he chose her and the retard baby. So what if it dies? They can always make another one, but that's not the worst part. Her dad breaks his silence and asks, so your mom and Chris aren't getting divorced? And Chris, this bat crazy was having a blatant affair with her much older stepfather, made him choose between her and her pregnant mother, and then made sociopathic comments about her unborn brother. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes everyone. I would like to clarify a few things. This conversation took place at a Mimi's Cafe in the East Valley of the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. She was 100 white trash from head to toe. My family seriously were expecting a camera crew for a prank-type TV show to show up. It's hard to fathom someone that demonic truly does walk amongst us. Also, I'm not positive the man she was dining with was her father. He looked old enough and they had similar facial features. Story 4. Waiting to Skype call my long-distance girlfriend and before the video comes on the audio peaks up, heard her roommate yell to her, you gonna dump that sorry little boy now? She immediately turned off the feed and broke up with me over Skype text instead. Nice. Story 5. I'd been on holiday for about a month on the other side of the world to my family. I had FaceTimed my mom and told her what I was up to, found out what was going on back home, just normal conversation. Eventually we said bye and mom ended the call, or so she thought. She had just paused it so the audio was still coming through. I heard my little sister ask her, are you crying? And mom said not now. I quickly hung up. I think she missed me and didn't want me to know she was sad. Story 6. I heard half of a phone conversation. A man said into his phone, I ain't doing this, there wasn't supposed to be no security guard here. Overheard by me, the security guard, in a bank that had recently been robbed. Story 7. I was visiting my brother from out of state. I'm female. We went to the store, he dropped me off at his college apartment, and then he and my dad went to run a different errand. My brother's landline phone rang. I went to answer it, but it went straight to his answering machine. This was a while ago, 1999. The message was a male voice saying, hey, I saw you just a little while ago with a kind of ugly girl. Edited to add, your frustration at trying to figure out how this made sense in the above sentence is me, a 40 person, trying to understand some of the pop culture references you gosh darn kids throw around. Story 8. We don't need to care about him since he's adopted. I was maybe 10 vacationing with some family friends at a local summer resort. The family was trying forever to have a baby and after 10-something years decided to adopt a toddler. A year later the woman got pregnant, ended up having 2 more bio kids and still loved her adopted still the same. The husband however became indifferent to their adopted and spoiled the bio baby rotten and took pleasure in making sure the adopted knows this. He made a lot of jokes of returning the kid since he is not blood related anyways and other comments that were hurtful and out of line. Soon cousins of the kid started to taunt this poor 4-year-old who was confused of why he was being teased. Mind you, this happened in a one-day span too. Mom tried to shield him as much as she can and the husband made a serious faux pas of making that comment in front of 10 other people from church too. He tried to backpedal fast but not before my scary mother, the leader of the friend group, ripped him a new one. He never joined us anymore in gatherings and eventually the whole family moved to another town months later. Story 9. When I worked at Waffle House, the location I worked at was part of the prison work release program. Our grill guy was a convict in for burglary and a few other charges. I'd say he worked there for maybe 6 to 8 months. Over the course of that 6 to 8 months he became romantically involved with a customer. Also behind her back, he was going up to the motel behind us for some steamy times with a few other servers. He was stringing a whole bunch of girls along. The girl who was his girlfriend wouldn't believe anything bad about him. She was a very young, sweet, naive girl and I felt bad for her tbh. Me and my fellow older seen it all lady servers tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen anyway. One night the girlfriend was there, and the two of them were in the stockroom doing whatever it was they did in there. I was on my way out the back door to throw some trash in the dumpster and I heard her say, you mean just leave? So I started to listen. He's trying to talk her into hopping in her van, grabbing her 2-year-old and taking off to Alabama with him. Troubled, I headed out front to mull over what I should do. Deep down I thought surely she's not that stupid. We got slammed right after this and one of the other complicit servers filled in for him on the grill so he could spend time with her in the closet. I had no time to think about what to do after that. I didn't realize they'd actually done it until the CO that came to pick him up was there, asking where he was. Everyone had disappeared at that point, knowing what was coming, leaving me to be the one to have to tell the guy he escaped, and I was pissed, beyond pissed. I just stood there, jaw clenched, staring at the prison guard angrily. He knew what I was about to say before I even said it. Fuck me, they took off and I knew what was coming after that. I knew the news would be there, I knew I was going to be questioned. Oh my god, I was so incredibly mad I could have turned into the sun. I was mad at them too. Him for being such an incredible doing this when he only had 3 months left on his sentence. Her for being so stupid as to torpedo her life and get her kid taken away. I liked both of them somewhat, pair of dumbass. So I got questioned and avoided being put on TV, thank God, and the manhunt ensued. All the second shift servers but me got fired or sent to other stores after it was found out what they'd all been doing. Some other things came out about them too, so it wasn't just for the escape incident. As to the pair of dumbass, she was found about a week later in Alabama, alone in a park, because Head abandoned her. Then a few days later he was found at his dad's house. Got 6 more years added to his sentence. She got her kid taken, lost her job and 2 years in prison, which she only had to serve about 6 months of. Stupid. Everybody in this story was stupid, including me. Story 10. It was when I was a kid and it was just my single mom and I living in a house together. She had late-stage ovarian cancer that was getting worse. One afternoon she told me she was tired and needed to go lay down in her room, totally common with her condition, so nothing struck me as odd. I went to her room with a glass of water to put by her bed for when she woke up, but right as about to turn the to get into her room, I was thrown off guard when I heard her voice and it sounded like she was incredibly emotional and sad. There was no phone in her room and I knew nobody was over at our house visiting. It took me a minute of eavesdropping to realize that she was using a tape recorder to record her last goodbyes to me for after she died. She died 2 weeks later. I found the tape. This was years ago and I still haven't been able to get myself to listen to it. The memory of being there while she was recording it, and the memory of my naive adolescent self finally realizing that my mom was about to die is just too overwhelming for me still, but I'm glad to know that one day when I'm ready, I will have a recording of her voice to listen to. Story 11. Not that much of an accident, but my mom caught my dad having an affair and I overheard her as she was yelling at the top of her lungs while my dad was sobbing begging her to take him back. Never looked at my dad the same way after that. Edit. Just for some more background. I was 16 when this happened, and am now 34. My parents are still together. Story 12. Once I was waiting for the elevator in my building and a guy came out of his apartment and screamed into his phone the following quote. Ahem, I could wyo and I still wouldn't be gay. We both looked at each other in shock as he receded into his home. I was 14 years old and it was the end of 8th grade. I hated middle school and was picked on mercilessly. As the end of the year celebration we went to one of those putt-putt driving range batting cage places and my older brother came and visited for lunch. He was like 19 and home from college and it was really sweet of him to do. I also have to note that objectively my brother is very attractive. At the time he was a college swimmer so he was in really good shape and all my friends were gaga about him. When I was in line to get some more food I heard these 2 bitchy girls in front of me go, how does she have such a hot brother when she turned out so bad? Oof, my poor fragile 14-year-old self-esteem. I pretended I hadn't heard them, left the line, and managed not to burst into tears. Teenage girls can be so cruel. Story 13 was bartending. On our busiest day, people were waiting everywhere even outside. Family is a little loud and rowdy. A kid about 8 can't be still. Him and a guy seems to be about late 20s are wrestling and acting up. Kid is yelling no and screaming. People are kind of used to them at this point. Suddenly the guy starts yelling I'm gonna grab your penis, and says it a few times. Kid is yelling no. The entire restaurant got dead silent and everyone was jaw-dropped staring. Finally, after a bit too long, the mother is like WTF, can't say that or act like that, and they all go outside. Story 14. So after we adopted our baby girl my grandparents came up to visit my mom. I was chatting with them, small talk and whatnot. They were acting uncomfortable, glared at me, snide remark here and there about why did I adopt her. So I go to use the bathroom but it's already in use. While standing by the door waiting this exchange happened. Grandpa, leave it to him to bring that squint into this country. Grandma, my daughter is worse than that damn his sister pushed out a few years ago. So yeah, had to pick up my daughter and leave before not being able to control my behavior and beat the out of 2 elderly people. FYI, my daughter is Chinese, my nephew is African American descent. Edit. Oh wow, what taking a day away from the internet will do to an inbox. So a bit more info. I was in a rush to get my kids to their activities yesterday. My grandparents and I have had a strained but reasonably civil relationship before this. My mom, their daughter never measured up to what they thought would be a good person. Both my sisters and I think we have an awesome mother and more or less follow in her footsteps as far as morals, outlook, etc. This of course meant my sisters and I never really measured up to our cousins who were great people in our grandparents' eyes. Apparently both my grandparents were stationed in Pearl Harbor, grandpa as a mechanic and grandma as a nurse. Both witnessed the kamikaze, saw friends die around the airport and in hospitals. According to my great-aunts and great-uncles, their brothers and sisters, my grandparents came back with a deep hatred of Asians, not just those responsible for their friends' deaths but all Asians. During my 7th grade year in school, my history teacher was a WW2 and Korean War vet. Being a private school, we didn't follow the normal curriculum but rather discussed the major intricacies leading up to WW2 and the worldwide aftermath. Basically, China and Japan didn't like each other. This is stuck in my mind pretty well after all these years, so for my grandparents to hate all Asians is just SMH. Anyway, to answer a few questions in this edit, that exchange took place in the summer of 2005. My daughter was 1 at the time. She's now 14 and is totally awesome. She also has a younger brother also from China who is also awesome. Yeah, I'm lucky as to have them in my life. My grandpa died about 2 years ago, grandma a few months later. Apparently they took me and my little sister, the one with the African-American son, out of their will. After listening to them back in 2005, I didn't want their money. We already donate to 2 charities that help Chinese orphans. Any inheritance they would have given us would have gone straight to those charities. My mother still doesn't know I heard this. She has 2 sisters that were beloved by grandpa and grandma. She also has had a multitude of really great aunts and uncles that she lived with more than her parents. Grandpa was physically abusive, probably PTSD after Pearl Harbor would be my guess. My mom turned out to be a great person despite my grandparents. She went with my wife and I to China to help with our daughter while we were there finishing up our paperwork. The real kicker in this entire mess: 3 of my 4 grandparents' grandma in this story came here from Germany. Grandpa from Ireland were first-generation immigrants from Europe back in the early 1920s. Only my dad's dad has a long-term lineage here in the States. I was furious when I overheard their chat but had to stop myself because I knew being dad from jail would be rough and my daughter needed a dad. We had already started paperwork to adopt our son. Having even a misdemeanor beat the out of old people conviction would have stopped that instantly. So guy at work was on his cell phone. He starts getting louder and louder. Eventually he is basically yelling into his phone. He was on the phone with his wife, verbally abusing her and yelling about how bad he was going to beat her when he got home. Security was called, he was fired, and the police were contacted about the potential abuse. Story 15. 2 of my best friends in high school had a conference call about me. I just happened to be with the 3rd friend they called and overheard how they thought I was annoying and am only friends with this other person for popularity. Stopped being friends with them shortly after this. Story 16 brought this up in another thread like a month ago. On my first day of college, while waiting online at the bookstore, I know you should never buy books at the college. 2 girls were behind me on the line talking about a cute guy in front of them on the line. I naturally took this to think it was me and it raised my ego quite a bit, until one of them tapped me on the shoulder and asking me to get the attention of the guy just ahead of me online. Story 17 heard a coworker plot with her husband to falsely accuse her ex of child abuse. She wanted full custody. She ended up with 1 supervised visit per month. I wonder who spilled the beans. Story 18. When I was 12, I overheard my stepdad saying to my mum how much better their life would be without me there and how awful I am and how he wishes I wasn't there. My mum just agreed. I wasn't even a bad kid, did well in school, never got in trouble. I could be a stroppy teenager. He was an awful, manipulative, violent misogynist, and I wish he wasn't here. Story 19. A few months ago in the gym, 3 guys were talking very loudly. I could hear them over my music. The weight room was pretty empty. One was talking about how his girlfriend was such a for not putting out. He detailed all her excuses, then went on to say at least he had his other girlfriend. One of the other ones piped up and said he should just wait until she falls asleep because then she can't do anything about it. They all cackled and he said he'd thought of that before but now he'd have to try it. Completely vile humans. Story 20. This crazy lady in a pizza shop was talking to herself, going on about how she hates niggers, Jews, fat people, the list goes on. So I turned around and asked if she was okay. Then I got a "fuck you, Ginger," and that was the end of that. It was low-key really funny cause everyone gave me that "I'm sorry" look and then they all silently shamed her. Then she got even more pissed and talked to herself louder. I didn't stay long enough to see if she got kicked out. I was in my garage one night a few years back when I overheard my teenage neighbor on the phone trying to convince his girlfriend to get an abortion. Story 21. I was on a coach bus traveling to another state and I woke up to someone whispering, "Hey, remember what we said earlier?" I thought they were about to argue again since they were going back and forth about something earlier, only to hear muffled sucking noises. At first I was like, "What?" Then was like, "Oh, HHH. Story 22. I don't know if this counts as overheard or not, but I guess this kind of counts. One night back in 2005, I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. "Hi, are you Thurong Baked Potato?" "Yes," I responded. I hate to ask this, but my daughter had a son a long time ago and gave him away. I've been looking for him since he was born. Do you know who all of your grandparents are? Were you adopted? Unfortunately for her, I knew my whole biological family. I recounted my family history and how I couldn't possibly be her wrong baked potato. She asked me a few times if I was sure, absolutely sure, but I had to specify that I was. Then she asked me a bit about myself, what I did in school and what I did for a living. I think she was trying to imagine what her lost grandson, who just happened to share my name, might be like. I hope that poor lady found her grandson. Story 23. When I was a teenager, our bedroom doors were nothing but shutters with handles. Way too many times did I have to listen to my still underage at the time older sister have phone while I was trying to sleep. Edit FFS people, I'm female and she's a. Even if she was hot, I'd still want to throat punch her for trying to get me grounded for eavesdropping when I told her to STFU at 2 a.m., through 2 doors and down a hallway. Story 24. On a bus. Guy, yeah, I'm moving in front of World Bar, blah blah, I'm going to pick up so much, blah blah. Yeah, you're probably right, that may have given me AIDS. Story 25. I guess it wasn't so much an accident as it was an inevitability, but as I was entering my dorm one day freshman year of college, a girl who was sitting in the courtyard shouted to her friend who was right behind me, "The doctor says nothing is wrong with me, I just have an abnormal nipple." Story 26. I was around 8 or 9 years old. It was early morning around Christmas time. I was laying in bed and I could hear my mom talking to somebody on the phone downstairs. She was talking loud enough for me to hear every word she was saying, and she ended up confirming my suspicions. Santa was not real. She said something along the lines of, "If Udra Sickthings wants to still believe in him, then I will let him." Later that day I was snooping around the Christmas tree looking at presents, and I saw a few gifts for me that were from Santa. This was at least a few days before Christmas, so the secret was out. My mom really dropped the ball that year. Story 27. Was eating at a Joe's Crab Shack several years ago. Our server was a younger black guy. So we're all done eating, restaurant is fairly empty. All of a sudden we hear him clear as day in the kitchen, "What? Nah, I will knock your motherfucking head off." Then we see him walk out of the kitchen with the manager. He goes outside for a few minutes to cool off presumably. A short time later he comes out with the desserts a couple people at our table ordered and says, all cheery, "So, who had the cheesecake? It was so weird." Story 28. I overheard a girl that I basically fell in love with, talking with her friend like, "He's cute but I think we will just stay friends." I overheard that literally seconds before I was going to invite her on a date. Story 29. I overheard my long-term boyfriend's mom talking negatively about me multiple times when she didn't think I was around. We have been dating a long time and I try to be as thoughtful as possible. It is what it is, I guess. I can't make her like me or change the way she is. Story 30. I was 14 and I overheard my mother talking with a doctor about my younger sister's cancer treatment. I had no idea she had cancer. She had no idea she had cancer. As soon as she got off the phone I asked her what was going on. She burst into tears. I burst into tears. My little sister was 8 at the time and had been ill for months, so I helped my parents talk to her. It was very upsetting. We shortly after took her to a clinic 500 miles away. Spent a week there. No cancer, no leukemia, misdiagnosed. She had an abscess that caused her symptoms, easily treated, but I'll never forget hearing the phone call. Story 31. You know that school in Akil, Oklahoma where the transgender kid is getting on because she just happens to live in the center of redneckery. I live 5 miles from that town, in a slightly larger center of redneckery. I was at the bar at Applebee's, only place to get a beer and food after work, don't judge, and the people across from me were talking about it. Apparently they didn't want their Christian kids to go to school with an it from the devil. The thing also was special enough to use the teacher's restroom. I sometimes get culture shock in my own hometown. I can't wait to move and never look back. Story 32. I work in a hospital. I overheard a doctor telling a 1-year-old's parents their child just died. I will never forget the sounds that came out the mother. Story 33. NSFW. Outside of a nightclub a drunken couple were splitting up. "Him, I can't believe what I've heard tonight. You've had half the blokes in this town up your shitter. You're a mucky. I'm leaving you, her, you're not getting your CDs back." Story 34. I was on a cruise and reading a book in one of the lounges. This very upset woman sat sort of behind me, and her husband was with her. She was crying because their vet had some bad news about their dog, and she was trying to call the vet. She told the husband after she got off the phone that she needed 15 minutes to listen to a song by herself and collect her thoughts. He asked if he could get her anything and she said no, she just wanted to be alone for a minute, once he left. She called her boyfriend and started giving him grief about girls liking his pictures on Instagram and how jealous she was and was making plans to sneak off to call him later. I had my son and about 2 months after he was born I was called a lazy mother by my own mother. A couple months later she was on the phone with one of her friends claiming I abused my son because I let him cry a bit longer than she deemed necessary. I was outside her door at 2 a.m. to bring him back to bed. I was 21 and was shell-shocked with being a mom so suddenly. Didn't find out I was pregnant until I was almost 5 months along. I was rushed into a lot of things. Story 35. I left home at 18, because I lived in a toxic household with conservative Christianity as the excuse and mental illness as the aggravator. It should come to no surprise. But over the phone, I heard my mother telling my youngest sister that she hoped she became nothing like me. This hurt for 2 reasons. My sister is extremely like me, and to know that she is going through exactly what I went through, or worse in a bid to stop her from becoming like me, hurts. I left that home with so many issues, and I know that not only her, but my other siblings will eventually leave with a set of their own. I'm trying to talk to them frequently enough and alleviate the poison my mom is pouring into their minds, but my youngest sister is already depressed and much more. It's difficult, because they are homeschooled, so they only have me and other family members. They are totally isolated, as I was, and surrounded with religious propaganda. The reason for my mom to love me in her own way, love me when convenient to tout her good deeds to her church and pyramid scheme groupies, is because I'm queer, living with my same significant other, outside the bounds of marriage. Forget that I am successful. I'm currently pursuing 2 degrees to further my success in my adult life, and am combating my own laundry list of mental health issues and disabilities. Forget that I succeeded past everything she set me up against. I am queer, and that is a sin. Despite all of my accomplishments and the work I have put in to make sure that I can help my siblings escape when their time comes and on some level, make her proud, none of it matters, because I am queer. Story 36. When I was 7 we had 2 house phones in different parts of the house. I heard the phone ring one time and my parents were both holed up in my dad's office and picked up the phone, which I thought was weird. I picked up the other phone to satiate my curiosity, only to hear some lady screaming at my mom about how bad my dad was in bed and she doesn't care about him anyway, just wanted to get ahead at work. Was a lot to swallow at the time and an awkward afternoon. Story 37. When I heard my parents fighting about when my dad had to move out, the fight was loud and started getting violent before I broke it up. Also the day I learned my parents were getting divorced. Story 38. As my friend and I were waking through a parking lot, leaving a farmer's market, we heard a toddler screaming and shouting, "I want a lollipop, I want a lollipop," over and over. The very stressed out looking mother snapped back at him with not only, "You're never getting a lollipop ever," but follows that up with, "You're an embarrassment. Not even you're embarrassing me, just you're an embarrassment." My friend and I held our lips really tight until we got to our car. Story 39. Not the worst, but definitely a head-shaking moment. I was at the D.C. Zoo with me little girl visiting the gorilla exhibit, when a small boy 10 to 11 years old turns to his mother and asks, "Mom, it says that we've evolved from primates, is this true?" Which point his mother scolds him and says, "Don't read that filth. All humans have descended from Christ, not primates. Start reading your Bible and stop reading your science book." I was genuinely stuck in awe for a few minutes as I felt a bit sorry for the small boy. Story 40. No, I wouldn't ever date that kid. He is UGLY. A crush of mine in middle school describing why she wouldn't ever go out with me while she didn't know I was walking a few people behind her in the hall. It got a good laugh from everyone else, but middle school me did not like that moment very much. LOL. Also, probably not the worst thing I have ever heard, but it's all I can remember right now. Story 41. My mother and father were arguing one night. My mother had a bunch of pill bottles on the kitchen counter. My father, sister and I woke up because they were so loud. We got out of bed, watched them arguing. Our father said to our mother right in front of us, "Go ahead and kill yourself, but I'm not taking care of these kids." Our mother looked at us and walked past us and went to bed. Our father then yelled at us to go back to bed. Our ages were 8, 6 and 4. Story 42. Someone describing to their friend how to commit rape and get away with it. "I'm glad I kicked him out of my life. I'm glad you got back into drugs. I hope you overdose, cocksucker." Story 43. I once overheard in a bus a woman explaining to her friend that she didn't like that her new 10-years-old daughter had to live with them because her mom was in hospital, so she had hidden money and valuables in the little girl bag, and was planning to confront her about the theft with present and get her kicked out of the house. When that turbo cunt friend asked where the girl would go once she was kicked out, mom in hospital and all that monster of a woman answered she can sleep under the bridge or work on her back like her of a mother. I don't give a. This is my man and she can die for all I care. I swear if that poor kid had been with them I would have brought her home with me. I am no maternal by any way, but some things and people are just nightmarish. 'Twas over a decade ago, but in high school during baseball practice I heard something from one of the seniors roughly along the lines of, "Yeah man, the jar in my car that I keep all my is already half full." Story 44. A girl in math class talking to her friend about having with a girl, talked about taking it slow and then they talked about fingering. All that happened, then I looked up, they were looking at me and to see if I had a. I didn't, so they said maybe I'm into but stuff. The two girls were hot, but that went from 0 to the speed of light. Story 45. Once on a train ride home, I overheard a young woman's phone conversation about becoming a prostitute and trying to find a pimp in graphic detail, including accepting that she would occasionally get the beat out of her. It was horrific AF. We had this class in high school that was out of campus, so a school bus had to take us. The bus would drop us off and stay there parked until the class ended, and the bus driver would drive us back. Class was an hour long. Bus driver waited inside the bus with the ignition off. It was finals for that class, but I had finished it a day earlier than everyone, so I decided to stay on the bus and fall asleep. Bus driver proceeds to have the most explicit and dirty conversation with his wife on the phone, stuff like "I'm gonna tie you up, whip you," and you type stuff. Mind you, this class was at 8 a.m. How horny do you have to have these conversations at 8 a.m. LMAO? He was oblivious that I was on the bus since I was close to the back. He eventually realized later during the drive back that I never got off the bus since he never saw me get back on, but I was there somehow. He gave me a stare of pure shame on the rearview mirror. It was hilarious and weird. Story 46. I'm brown-skinned. Once I was walking in my town and accidentally bumped shoulders with someone. I said sorry, he just sort of grumbled. "Shit-skin terrorists semen are under his breath." I just kept walking, but man, that guy was a. Though to be fair, I did quite like the word shitskin. Story 47. Passed two people on the street. Oh, I have the most amazing story to tell you. I was in a hurry, so I had to keep walking away, without hearing what was about to be told. Story 48. My landlord sometimes comes into my apartment without notice. For reasons I do not know, I've caught it on tape. There's not much to be done about it apparently. The acoustics of the hallway are such that if people are talking in a normal voice out there, you can clearly hear their conversation from inside the apartment. I've been laid off of work for 9 months now, so I've not plated my car and instead rode my bike around, and the car just sits there. Granted, I am home most of the time, but my car is no indication. I suffer from bipolar disorder, OCD, and a lot of anxiety, so I've got a bunch of self-affirming quotes pinned up on my wall. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't hate your life, you hate the way you feel sometimes. You are a good person. Just stop and breathe, ECT. This all seems random. Let me put it together. A couple of months ago, someone was viewing the place across the hall from me, and the landlord was talking with him. I heard her make comments about how I never leave the house or have people over because I am so mentally ill. She had obviously seen my quote wall, probably my prescriptions on the counter too. She specifically made a comment to the effect of I have a feeling that one might off himself and leave me with a huge mess to clean up. How I was weak, unwilling to try ECT. How she's so strong because she was depressed for a couple weeks before. She went for a walk every day and started feeling great. If I would leave the apartment once in a while I wouldn't have these problems. She went on about how I don't work and am probably on welfare to pay rent. Spewed a bunch about how welfare should change so lazy people like me are forced to take charge of their lives. Like 5 full minutes of making the worst possible assumptions about me with no real info, insulting me, and airing my secrets to this stranger who she's known 10 minutes frankly to everyone on this floor who is at home and paying any type of attention to the talk from the hallway. I also learned from that conversation that the child of the young lady down the hall from me is a fatherless. Her boyfriend beat her and is in jail now and she's trying to raise the kid on her own. While she was talking about me I really wanted to open my door and say something. She was 2 feet away on the other side. I had no idea what to say though, and quite frankly all the things she had said had upset me to the point that I didn't trust myself to conduct myself in the best manner. A couple of minutes after she quit talking about me and started talking about the lady down the hall, I just backed away from my door 10 feet, pretended I was talking on a phone and loudly said you wouldn't believe how loud the hallway can get, you should hear this fat landlord and the way she talks about people. Then I very quickly summed up what she said about me, then pretended to change topic and move back deeper into my apartment. Once they heard me start talking they stopped, and I'm sure she heard me. I guess on the plus side I got to rightfully call my landlord A to her face without any repercussions.